Welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. My name is Jerry Snyder. As a health, wellness, and sports performance coach, my goal each week is to bring you experts to help you take control of your health and build your self-confidence. Thanks for including me today on your journey to better health. As an elite level runner and coach, I'm excited to introduce you to the All In Running Club. The All In Running Club exists to help you become a better runner. Whether you're a beginner, an elite runner, or anywhere in between, the mission of the All In Running Club is to give you the tools you need to find your success in running. Join today to take advantage of the 75% off yearly membership rate offer. Click the link below in the show notes to learn more. So I want to thank you, Dr. Stone, for being a guest on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
All right. Thank you for having me here. It's exciting.
So, you know, when I was introduced to you and heard the name of your book, which is Thyroid Transformation Blueprint, I was like, I have to have you on because I know there's a ton of people that struggle with the idea of what is the thyroid? What does it do? How does it help me? You know, how do I interpret all of this stuff and find a doctor that can help me do all that? So getting into functional medicine, getting into like looking at the thyroid, like what drove you to do all of this and find these answers for people?
So for me, it's like many doctors, you have your own personal journey that,
Right.
You're kind of guided through that really puts you on this mission or purpose that you have, this passion. So for me, I was about 50 pounds overweight when I was in college, and I was
Okay.
tired, and my menstrual cycles were all a mess. And so, my roommate, her dad was a doctor, and he hooked me up with the best gynecologist in, Texas. And so I was like, all right, so I'm going to go to this doctor and he is going to really help me. And at the time I was in pre-med, and I did not know which kind of doctor I wanted to be. I was like,
Right.
I know I want to be a doctor. I know I'm supposed to be on this path, but I just don't know what path to go down. And interestingly enough, intuitively, I was like, I definitely do not want to be an ER doctor. I don't know why. That just was not my calling. So I go to this doctor, and I only knew a little bit, right? This was pre-Dr. Google. So we didn't have all this information at our fingertips. And so I go and I say, I think I might have a thyroid problem. I can't lose weight. I exercise often. My menstrual cycles are off, and I'm really tired.
Yeah.
Like classic thyroid symptoms.
Right.
And so he says, okay, well, let's run some blood work. And he runs blood work. Now, at the time, I didn't know enough to ask him for my test results. I didn't know what he ran. He probably ran a TSH, which is the extent of like what most doctors run, especially back then. And I come in for the results, and he says, everything's normal. There's nothing wrong. And he says, I think the reason that you don't have a menstrual cycle is because you exercise too much.
Okay.
And I was like, that's bizarre. So then after that, he says, as he's walking out the door, by the way, you're probably not going to be able to have children naturally. You're going to need some fertility treatments. And I am very thankful that that whole thing happened, because the second that he told me that I didn't have a menstrual cycle because I exercised too much, I knew that that wasn't true.
Right.
Because I knew that when women's body fat goes below like 10% because they're extreme athletes and they exercise too much, then you can lose your menstrual cycle. That was not anywhere close to where I was at. He was saying that and inferring that because he didn't have another reason, but I was 50 pounds overweight. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me. And thank God I knew enough to know that that didn't make sense. So then when he told me I was not going to be able to have children naturally, I also knew that did not make sense. And at that point, I was like, you know what, this is not going to be my life. I'm going to figure out a solution to this. And it wasn't that I wanted to figure out a solution to help everybody else. At the moment, I was like, I have bigger things that I need to accomplish. I cannot be living in this way. And so I need to figure it out. So as I figured it out, I knew there wasn't a medication. I knew there was a disease that I didn't have. So there was nothing that they could do for me. I knew exercising more wasn't really the thing that I should be doing. So I really figured out how it is that I should be eating, how should I be exercising, what do I need to do to continue to improve my health. So it took me about a year.
Okay.
Well, probably about 2 years passed from that moment because, I hadn't yet figured out what path I was going down. I was just still
Right.
on that journey. But once I figured it out, I was like, it took me about a year to lose the 50 pounds and to get everything back on track. And I have two boys that I did not have to use fertility treatments. They're
Right.
now 17 and almost 20. So,
Yeah.
so then I was like, this is the path. I did not realize that there were millions of ladies, about
Yeah.
12% of our population struggles with this thyroid issue. And so many of them are still dealing with all of those symptoms without a true solution. And so this
Yeah.
is my path. If I can do it and maintain the results, surely I could help other women do the same.
Right. And like, I don't know, from the people that I talk to, I would say 12% is probably low. I would think it's higher than that. Like,
Probably so, but I don't want to overestimate.
right. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Um, but so like for those people that don't know, like the thyroid helps with hormone balance, right?
Yeah, yes, it does. But so that we really understand what this thyroid does, the
Mhm.
thyroid is so important that the thyroid hormone is the only hormone in the body that has a receptor site on every single cell in your body from head to toe. That's why you can have like all of these crazy symptoms and it's hard to kind of put together and associate because it
Right.
literally affects every body system. The purpose of thyroid hormones, the main purpose is to regulate the metabolic rate, right?
Okay.
So
Right.
it's to speed up or slow down metabolism. So that's why when we start to have low thyroid, we start to have all of these symptoms like we can't lose weight, we get tired. Like if you just think of your metabolism, if you just turn down the dial you turn down the dial on your metabolism,
Hmm.
that's what people experience when it's low thyroid. If you increase the dial to where it's beyond normal, like above normal, you get all of those things like you have a super fast metabolism, like you lose weight and your heart palpitates and you can have a heart attack or stroke. There's lots of
Right.
things that happen when you're in hyperthyroid, but essentially it's your body's regulation. It's regulating your metabolic rate. That's why you get cold when you have low thyroid, or you can get hot when you're in hyperthyroid.
Right.
But that's
Okay.
the main job, is to regulate your metabolic rate. But it's also really important to understand, in our medical system, everything is broken into parts.
Right.
And so, everything works together. So your thyroid helps balance your blood sugar. Your
Hmm.
thyroid helps regulate inflammation. Your liver helps you convert thyroid hormones, right? So
Yeah.
everything absolutely works together. But the main job of the thyroid is to regulate your metabolic rate, but it plays a role in so many other processes and systems throughout the body, that it is hard to really separate. And I think that's a really important, to not think that the thyroid works by itself.
Well, and so sort of a side note that, or not to go too far in a different direction, but with the main, the way that main medical system is set up, and now we're so siloed into this doctor is so pinpoint into I work on this specific organ or this specific disease or this specific that if somebody has a thyroid issue, it could be really easy to miss that if the symptoms are showing up in one organ, but they're also showing up in other ones, but you just go to this doctor for this one specific thing.
That's right. Like, for example, somebody has heart palpitations or
Mhm.
they're an AFib and they go to their cardiologist, and their cardiologist starts running all of these tests.
Right.
They do an EKG, they do every test known to man. They're like, your heart's fine, but it's their thyroid.
Right.
And so they go and they do all of this stuff for their cardiovascular health. And
Right.
all the whole time, they have this low thyroid thing. And the cardiologist typically doesn't even check that because they're
Right.
focused on your cardiovascular system. And then
Right.
they'll say, well, your heart's fine. I don't know why you have that problem. Everything's good. You don't require any medication. And so then it's up to you to be like, well, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
Is it how would you know to go see an endocrinologist or
Right.
what else might be going on? So it is really important, like you said, to look at the body as a whole system, because things do get missed when we start to keep compartmentalizing all of our organ systems, because they all work together.
Right. And so, like, how common is it to go and get tests done and thyroid to be quote unquote normal, but it could be like malfunctioning at like different times, right? Based on either what we eat or how we sleep
Yeah.
or.
Yeah, so it is extremely common. So
Okay.
what we need to understand is that in traditional medicine, now this is not like bashing it, it's just the
Sure.
way that it's set up. And certainly there's a place for that. But in traditional medicine, the whole model is a disease drug therapy model, right? So we're looking for a disease to prescribe a drug or a surgery, and that's the solution, right? We drug it out, burn it out, or cut it out.
Right.
So essentially, when you're set up in this disease drug therapy model, they're not looking for dysfunction. They're not looking for where is the body out of optimal?
Right.
Where is the body dysfunctioning? Where is the imbalance? And so when you're only looking for disease, you're going to miss so many of these women who have low thyroid issues, because they have a strict guidelines for these labs that they run. These lab ranges are very wide. And essentially, it's just the way they come up with these lab ranges is they take all of the people that have gone into the labs in a certain region, and they graph them on a bell-shaped curve, and they take the median, and then they go out 2 standard deviations, and they say, this is going to be our normal.
Right.
And who goes into the labs? Mostly it's people that are suspecting they have a problem. It's not like our healthy 10, teenagers and 20 and 30 years olds. It's the older population that has diseases that these lab ranges are established from.
Right.
So you could be right at the edge of the front and the back of these labs, and then they say, okay, everything's normal. You don't have any issue going on, but you could have a lot of dysfunction. And with the thyroid in particular, the thyroid specifically, the gold standard is to run a TSH. Now, if you're lucky, they will run a thyroid panel with a TSH, which that would include a TSH, a total T4, a T3 uptake, and the free thyroxine index. Okay, so 4 markers.
Okay.
And a full thyroid panel actually has 12 markers. So they're not running all of the markers that actually need to be run to properly evaluate the full health of the thyroid. But back to the model, all they're looking for is the disease of hypothyroid. Do you have hypothyroid where you have low T4 hormone, and then the drug that goes with that is synthroid, levothyroxine. They may do armor thyroid, tyrosine, MP-thyroid, whatever. But that's the toolbox, right? So the model is, do you have clinical hypothyroid where your TSH is high, and then we apply the drug? Now, if your TSH is anywhere within that lab range, but let's say you have plenty of T4, but you're under converting to T3, which is the active thyroid hormone, or maybe your body is pushing all of that T4 into a reverse T3 so that the body is like trying to slow down the metabolic rate, all of that gets missed. And then they get told, well, there's nothing wrong with your thyroid, just as I did, right? You just need to lose weight and you need to eat less and exercise more. But some of these ladies are like, hey, how do you eat survive on less than 1,000 calories a day? And I'm killing myself to even exercise, and I can't make enough energy because I don't have all the things that I need. So it becomes really frustrating. And so many ladies give up because they think there is no solution. Right. Because that's what their doctors are telling them, or, they're just not getting full thyroid panels done for the most part, because the tools that are used in traditional medicine are increase, decrease T4 or T3 hormones. And that's the extent of it.
and from like a metabolic to go back to the metabolic rate, like if you're decreasing the amount of intake, your body naturally says, I've got to store more, right? And it slows
Yep.
things down even more, whether without
Yeah.
a thyroid issue. Like a healthy person would do the same thing. A person with a healthy thyroid,
Yes.
they would slow down even more. And so you're really not even like it's a bad cycle to be on.
It's like it is, and it's a really bad cycle. And I talk about the disappointment that
Yeah,
happens because the solution that you know about, told from doctors, is to eat less. And
yeah,
the less that you're eating, the body's like, oh my gosh, I have no, if there's nothing coming in, so I got to make sure we have plenty of reserves. So we got to store all of this for later because there's nothing coming in right now. So it's
yeah.
crazy, but I think it's important ask the question, why would the body slow down the metabolic rate? Like, this is the question
Hmm.
that we really need to be asking, because from a functional perspective, the body's always trying to protect us, right? Like
Right.
the
Yep.
body's always moving towards survival and moving in a direction to protect us. So whatever helps us survive.
Right.
And so in traditional medicine and even in allopathic nutrition, where allopathic nutrition means that, like, if you have low energy, you go to the supplement store and you find something to help with energy, even though it's
Right.
natural, it's still trying to suppress a symptom
Right.
without figuring out what's going on underneath the surface. So there's a lot of practitioners that practice allopathic nutrition,
Right.
right? So, but if you move into the functional side and you say, all right, let's figure out this puzzle, because we're not trying to override the body's physiology with medication or supplements. We're trying to figure out where is the underlying imbalance where
Hmm.
the body is moving into a state of protection. So it's pushing you into hypothyroid, or maybe it's causing an underconversion issue to protect you. So, like, what could be going on there?
Yeah.
Usually in those instances, we start to see also insulin resistance, because the
Hmm.
body, what happens is the body, when you take glucose from the blood and you pull it into the cell or the mitochondria's job is to take that sugar or glucose and make energy or
Right.
ATP.
Right.
What comes as a result of that is like some leftover garbage, or
Hmm.
what we would call reactive oxygen species, or somebody may have heard of it as oxidation or oxidative stress.
Right.
The body has to clear that oxidative stress out, or it advances the aging process. So we have to be able, with all of our detoxification pathways, right? We
Hmm.
have to be able to clear out those toxins. When those toxins or that oxidation starts to build up, the body's like, man, we got a fire here.
Yeah.
And if we don't stop the body from making all this energy, then we're going to end up with a bigger fire and these cells are going to start dying off. So then we start to become insulin resistant. The body's storing fat.
Right.
We move into more of a hypothyroid state, because the body's trying to down regulate your metabolism.
Hmm.
And then what happens? We get diagnosed with low thyroid and they try to shove all these hormones into us to raise our metabolic rate. And
Right.
they're trying to get us to exercise to raise our metabolic rate. Meanwhile, we can't detoxify all this stuff out. And it's pretty amazing when you
Yeah.
look at all of this stuff through laboratory testing, and when you start to give the body what it needs to clear out these toxins and all this oxidative stress. And we change the diet and we work on exercise based on where a patient is,
Right.
not the diagnosis that they have, then the body starts to heal.
Yeah.
And then the insulin resistance starts to go away. And what do you know? Their thyroid starts to regulate a little bit better. And many patients, their medication dosage has to change because they're starting to reverse all of
Right.
this whole aging process and all of this dysfunction. And
Right.
I think it's really important for the people listening is that, your body is not your enemy. Your body is your friend. It is
Yeah.
working always towards survival. And I think when we get on this path of we can't lose weight, We're really tired. We have all of these symptoms. The doctors aren't giving us the information that we need. We start to worry or wonder why our bodies aren't working.
Yeah.
And it's like we will do anything to force our body to behave as we think it should be behaving,
Yeah.
right? And so I just think we get stuck in this cycle of hating our bodies and all of the stinking thinking that we start to
Yep.
get into. And it's because of the perception that the body is not cooperating. But if we just took a different look to know that the body is cooperating, we just may
Mhm.
not understand how and why it's responding the way that it does.
Yeah.
And when you do proper testing and you're very thorough, and we don't just look at the thyroid, but what's your blood sugar doing and what's your liver doing and your gallbladder and
Right.
adrenal function, like when you start to open and expand and look at the whole body as it's functioning, the answers become more clear. The path then becomes more clear, and then your body can start, you can move your body into a place where it seems like it's cooperating, even though it
Yeah.
is cooperating for you. It's just not the way you think it should be going.
Right. Well, and that's looking at it from the standpoint of like, I want the magic pill,
Yep.
right? Versus like, okay, I have to understand this is going to take some time
Mhm.
and it may not feel great all the time, right? Because one of the things you mentioned about is this detoxing, and that's one of the things I tell people all the time. It's like, okay, if you truly want to detox, it's potentially going to be uncomfortable
Yeah.
for a little bit. Like the other side of it's going to be okay, but you've got to get through that uncomfortable piece. And
Yeah.
everybody goes through it differently, but it could be digestive issues. It could be, feeling like you got a hangover or just
Yeah.
heavy brain fogs or whatever it is, because your body's getting rid of all that stuff. Well, it's still in your body. It's just got to flow out somewhere,
Yeah. That's right.
and
And I
that,
think it's important to realize that your health is a journey,
mhm,
right? So a lot of times, even when we do all of this testing and we're like, okay, this is the exact path that we're going to go down, it seems like the slope should always be an upward slope.
right,
But when we're dealing with the human body, the human body is way smarter than any of us.
right.
It does things that we don't even know about.
Yep.
And so it's always smarter than us. But if we just remember that it's always working in our favor.
Yeah.
So you will have ups and downs on this journey, and there is no destination, right? Like
Yeah.
patients think, well, if I would just lose 20 pounds, then I'm good to go. Then I can
Mhm.
go back to all of those terrible habits. But guess what happens? Then you slide backwards and you got
Right.
to keep moving forward. But your health is a journey. And the only time that it ends is when you take your last breath. And so
Yeah.
know that there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be moments when the body's healing that might be uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And you may have a lot of toxins that your body's releasing that you're not clearing out as quickly as you're releasing them. And so then you may have some reactions to that. And so, it is about being patient and knowing that there's ups and downs and there's
Right.
hills and valleys. And when you see testimonials from, I lost 30 pounds, like if I have a Facebook group and you'll see all of these ladies talking about all of their successes. And then I
Right.
have other ladies that get really discouraged because they think it just happened like that with no issues. I'm like, do you know how many times I talked to that poor lady and she was in tears?
Yeah.
But I said, everyone has valleys, but you just don't see them. But the
Right.
key is that they didn't give up in the valley.
Right.
And now you see them at the top where they had all of these successes. And so it is absolutely a journey. And I think one of the things that's really important for the people listening here that do have a thyroid problem, it's one of the things that I haven't really mentioned, but over 90%, up to 98% of women who have low thyroid actually have an underlying autoimmune condition called
Mhm.
Hashimoto's.
Right.
So this means that it's not really a thyroid problem primarily, it's an autoimmune condition. That means it's even more important to identify what are the triggers to this immune system? Why is the immune system attacking the thyroid? You know, and looking at this thing more globally instead of so myopic by just looking at the thyroid,
Right.
knowing that it's more of an autoimmune issue and not just a low thyroid issue. And that's why it's even more frustrating. Like when you do get diagnosed with low thyroid and you take your thyroid medication, but you don't have any results, or the results that you got are very short-lived because all the underlying issues have not been addressed.
Right.
And so the key is that your body is born to heal. Like we are a self-healing mechanism. So when you have symptoms, it's just your body's way of communicating with you that something's not right, that there's some kind of imbalance. And so I always like to position symptoms as blessings because it allows you to know that something's wrong.
Yeah.
And we can go to figure out where the imbalance is and what can we do to help facilitate the healing process, instead of ignore or override.
Well, and I've heard of Hashimoto's, and I've done a little bit of research on it, just like nowhere near, I'm sure, what most doctors that actually deal with it. But a lot of the testimonials I hear from people that have had it and overcome it is that the doctors that they saw that were in the traditional system had no idea what it is, no idea how to deal with it, no idea, and went to more of the, well, your thyroid's messed up, so let's give you a medication for that, versus, is it the thyroid or is it something else that's causing that? And I think that happens with a lot of autoimmune diseases, right? That like they're going to manifest in some other way.
Yes, I think I have a story for you, and I'll tell you in just a second. But Hashimoto's in general, right, it's important to know that if you have an underlying autoimmune condition, you are at risk for developing multiple autoimmune diseases and even thyroid cancer. And in traditional medicine, when you have low thyroid, they look in their toolbox and all they have in there is thyroid hormones.
Right.
So they know nowadays, like whenever I was, moving through this cycle, and I had Hashimoto's, it was rarely checked.
Yeah.
Now they understand that you likely have Hashimoto's. They're not going to check you for the most part. Some will, most won't, because there is no solution for that. Like
Right.
it doesn't change their therapy. So they can run the antibodies, TPO antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies. If they're positive, they still have the thyroid medication. So insurance companies don't like paying for that because it doesn't change therapy.
Right.
And they're going to deal with the other autoimmune diseases or thyroid cancer when that comes up. So that's the approach. Now, they could give you another medication that they use for other autoimmune diseases that shut down the immune system. But the side effects of those medications are worse than just dealing with Hashimoto's. And even the thyroid cancer, usually thyroid cancer, I heard this from a patient the other day, thyroid cancer is the good cancer. Or actually, I read it in one of the magazines that were just, I'm like, did that just say good cancer?
Oh my gosh.
Because there is no good cancer, but they consider thyroid, if you're going to get cancer, it would be good to get thyroid cancer because it doesn't have a high mortality rate. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is craziness.
Yeah.
But they would rather deal with that because when you're dealing with autoimmunity, it's so complex.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do it to override the body's physiology is to shut down the immune system. But from a functional perspective, we have to look at insulin, all the triggers, insulin surges. So your diet is huge. We have to look at adrenal function and how your body's, handling stress. We have to look at hormones like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. We've got to look at food sensitivities and gut health and brain health and inflammation and toxins. Like there is no medication that you could do to address all of those issues. And so they would never get anywhere unless they just shut down the immune system. So they're really not going to do that.
Yeah.
And you made a comment, like they don't really have a lot of solutions for autoimmunity in general. I said earlier, my oldest son is almost 20. And this weekend, his college roommate got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And my son being my son, says, hey, my mom helps patients with autoimmune diseases. And his roommate knows I'm a little bit wacky. And he goes,
Right.
I'm not changing my diet. So my son said, well, maybe you should start with not drinking your Dr. Pepper. And I
Right.
said, how much Dr. Pepper does he drink? And he's like, at least a case a week. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, he goes, I thought he should at least start there. So I was laughing and I talked to his mom. I just happened to be at their baseball game. His mom came and talked to me and she's like, yeah, he got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And they said that he was going to be on this medication to suppress his immune system for the rest of his life. And he has to get a colonoscopy every 3 years because he's at an increased risk of colon cancer. I said, oh, I usually don't try to give my opinion nor give advice if somebody's not asking for it. And she's
Right.
like, yeah, my friend is a colon surgeon. And I'm like, that should be your first warning. um, I didn't. And she said, well, what she said is that he needs to take his medication every day and he absolutely needs to not smoke. And there was no other changes that he needs to make, no dietary changes.
Wow.
I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I'm like, I almost fell out of my chair, but I didn't. Like the
Yeah.
best advice they can give you is don't smoke. Well, everybody knows really you should not
Right.
smoke. And
Right.
especially if you have an autoimmune condition. But she said, is there any dietary information? And she said, no, not really. He really shouldn't change his diet right now. And I'm
Oh my
like, to
gosh.
think in the medical field that you don't think that what you put into your mouth impacts your intestines. Like, I mean, I guess I could go on a big limb and say maybe you don't think that what you eat affects your thyroid, but your
Right.
intestines and
Yeah.
the ulcerative, the inflammatory process, the autoimmune process. I was just blown away because how antiquated the information is in
Right.
our traditional medical system. It's literally a drug therapy model,
Yeah.
right? Like give a drug or have a surgery or whatever. And there is no thinking outside of that box. And even
Right.
patients of mine will go to their doctors and they'll be like, oh my gosh, what have you been doing? They're like, well, I don't know what you've been doing, but you should just keep doing what you're doing. And it's not like, tell me what you're doing. How can I learn this so my other
Right.
patients get better? It's like, you just keep doing what you're doing, honey, and you're doing awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, the front on autoimmunity, first of all, the incidence is just growing exponentially in our
Right.
population. And the solution from traditional medicine is extremely unhelpful or just suppress the immune system and then go on your merry way. And we'll deal with the consequences as they come because there will be consequences.
Right. Well, and I was telling you before we recorded that my wife has dealt with issues, and um, we actually are switching doctors. There was an insurance issue, and so we had to leave the doctor that we liked, and she picked another one. And this was back, this was 2019. It was right before COVID hit, and I was like, okay, I learned about this the oat test. I was like, you know what? Go get your doctor to take that, like, because she keeps telling you all your labs are fine. I was like, go get this one done. And the doctor was literally like, why do you want this done? Like, who's telling
Yeah.
you to do this? And she's like, my health coach husband is telling me to do this. Like, and the doctor's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, okay, well, the insurance won't cover it. So are you
Yeah.
going to pay it out of pocket? And I was like, yes, we're going to pay it out of pocket, get the test done. And she gets the results back, and the doctor's like, well, I don't know how to read this. Here,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that is really true. Like, even if you ask your doctor to do those 12 markers of the full
right.
thyroid panel, I've had patients give it to their doctor and they're like, you might want to go talk to Dr. Stone because I don't know how to read that.
Yeah.
Like, I know how to diagnose if you have low thyroid by a high TSH, or I know how to see if you're in hyperthyroid by a low TSH. And that's the extent of what we're working with, because
Yeah.
if there isn't a medication or a surgery as the solution, they just don't have that training. I mean,
Right.
it's just not in their training.
Right.
But it's crazy, right? Because an oats
Yeah.
test, I mean, It tells you if you have, vitamin deficiencies, if you
Right.
have excess hormones or low hormones, or it's extremely helpful test if you know what you're looking at. It'll tell
Right.
you maybe if you have some mold issues going on.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, but see, none of that is medication or disease based. So
Right.
they would have no foundation really to interpret those results.
Right. And in her health journey, like when I started becoming a health coach 7.5 years ago and really diving into the nutrition side of things, like working with her, and she would have flare-ups and gallbladder flare-ups. And I've got one of my best friends at, at the time, he was a colorectal surgeon. He's now moved on to some other specialties. And he was just like, we were at his house one time and she had a flare-up and he was like, "Oh, I can take your gallbladder out tomorrow. Like I can
Yeah.
get you on the calendar." And I was like, "Whoa." I was like, "No." I was like, and it's funny because, and he laughs about it, but he's like, "I'm a surgeon. I want to do surgery.
That's
Like
right.
that's the solution."
Yep.
And I'm like, "Okay." And now she rarely has a gallbladder flare up. She knows exactly when it's going to happen
Mhm.
because of what she eats.
Yep.
Like she knows if I eat this, I'm going to flare up. And so it's a choice that I'm going to make. And and I think that's more helpful than being on medication for the rest of your life, knowing that, okay, if I eat this, it's going to trigger something and I'm going to have to deal with it. It doesn't mean I can't ever have this anymore. It just means, okay, I might have a side effect from that. I'd rather
Yeah.
have that side effect than a continuous side effect all my life because the medication has got this long list of things that are going to happen to me.
Right. And I think, it's interesting with the gallbladder. It's like you don't realize that the gallbladder helps with digestion, it helps with
Hmm.
detoxification, it helps with thyroid conversion of T4 to T3. Like, essentially, they just take it out at any sign. I have a similar story. My mom, she had been having some pain and some like gallbladder stuff, and it would come and go, and it was really far in between, so I wasn't too terribly concerned about her. And then she came to visit me, and I looked at her eyes, and they were yellow. And
Mm,
I only seen someone jaundice in school or read
right.
about it or seen pictures. I'm like, I was in Whole Foods at the checkout line. I go, "Mom, your eyes are yellow." She goes, like, looks around and she's like, "Why did you yell at me so loud?"
Right.
I'm like, "Oh my God, how long have your eyes been yellow?" And my dad happened to be in the parking lot. We go out there. I'm like, "Dad, did you notice that her eyes were like literally like a Halloween cat?" And he goes, "No, I never really paid attention." And I said, "Mom, what's going on? You don't actually look like you feel good." And she goes, "Well, I didn't tell you, but I had an attack coming home. I went to this farm and I ate a hamburger, but I promise it was no bun."
Right.
And it was no bun and all the sides. And maybe I had a few French fries. I know I'm not supposed to do that, but I didn't think it was going to create this issue. And so I did her labs. Her liver enzymes were over
Hmm.
150. I think one was over 200, and her bilirubin was high, and she had Hashimoto's, and her thyroid got all messed up. And I
Yeah.
always check her blood work. Like I've never seen those markers before. And so one of our clinicians that we work with, an MD, I sent her labs over to him because I was like, "Hey, could you just make sure like you don't think this is maybe some kind of cancer or something
Right.
crazy that we're dealing with?" And he goes, "Nope, but she needs her gallbladder out." I'm like, "All right." He's like, "Get her off of all of her supplements and she probably needs her gallbladder out." I'm like, "That's not happening." So what I did was I said, "All right, this is what you're doing. We're doing a detox.
Hmm.
And I'm going to really support your gallbladder. We're working on all these things." And she started feeling better, within a couple of weeks. And then 30 days, I ran her labs and they were completely normal.
Yeah.
I'm like, "Thank God." And she hasn't had an issue since, but it's like the first thing is just take it out.
Right.
And then and the MD knew that we use supplements, and so he's like, "Get her off her supplements," as if
Yeah.
that's going to be the thing that's hurting her. So
Right.
I knew that wasn't the issue. She probably had a gallstone that kind of blocked the bile duct, but we
Hmm.
needed to get the bile like running and
Yeah.
moving again. It was probably really sludgy. But I know they would have taken her gallbladder out. She would have had a weight problem for the rest of her life. She would have
Right.
never been able to get it out. Her thyroid would be off and she'd have to be on bile salts, forever.
Yeah.
So, I think that There is
Yeah.
usually a solution, unless you're in a state of complete emergency.
Right. Well, and so you mentioned, it took it 30 days. And granted, I mean, you're not going to test her like the next day, like if you're going to
Right.
give it time to work. But so that brings the question, like if somebody does have either a low functioning thyroid or an over functioning thyroid, like and they want to take the time to take care of it naturally and not go to medication, and they're trying to figure out, like, you can get that working well again,
Yeah,
right? It's not like
absolutely.
it's just like, oh, it's going to run out of, it's going to be done and you're just going to have to like deal with it.
Well, I'll say this, like if someone has underlying Hashimoto's, the immune system is attacking and killing the thyroid.
Right.
So it does depend on how long that process has been going on.
Mhm.
Like for me, I have Hashimoto's, but I caught it really early. So I don't
Right.
have to have thyroid medication. And many of our patients, we catch it relatively early and we can get their body functioning so that they don't need medication or they can get off of their medication.
Right.
Many times ladies do have to stay on medication because the thyroid can't produce enough because it has been attacked by the immune system.
Mhm.
But the bigger goal is, can we resolve all the symptoms,
Right.
right? Can you live an amazing life even if you have to take a little bit of thyroid hormone? And can you protect yourself from developing other autoimmune diseases?
Mhm.
Like that's ultimately the goal in our practice, right? Like
Yeah.
if you can lower or get off thyroid medication, then that is like the cherry on top. The
Mhm.
goal is to calm down the immune system, get it balanced, get rid of all of your symptoms, and allow you to live the best quality of life that you can live and add years to your life.
Right. Well, and that's really the biggest piece, because it as your metabolic rate is slowing, it is taking years off your life,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Hmm.
One way or another, it's harming your cells and making things difficult, and you really like, it's the subconscious level. It's like you're not thinking about it. You don't know, you're not telling your cells to go and do these processes. They're just doing them, without you knowing about it. But when they're not working properly, no matter where they are in the body, like that's why you don't feel well. That's why you have, symptoms, but they may show up everywhere else. I mean, just like you said, with the thyroid affects everything. Like you could have issues that in your brain function, or, your eyesight, or anywhere, that's like
Yeah.
ultimately comes down to the thyroid's not working properly.
Right. Think about this, right? You're slowing down your metabolic rate, which means brain function, right? One
Yeah.
of the highest metabolizing cells is your brain cells. And
Right.
so when you start to become insulin resistant, everything starts to slow down. And I mean, going to the gym does not necessarily increase your metabolic rate,
Right.
right? You can try to force it. Now you're just
Right.
using up even extra ATP and you're like even more wiped out.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really help this whole process. So you got to work on it from a physiological perspective. But yeah, I mean, and brain function is absolutely huge. And when you think about the brain, it's intertwined with the thyroid and your glucose and infections and toxins. And, if you have leaky gut, you've got leaky brain. And so
Right.
all of your whole body works together.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of going to the gym, most people that have listened to an episode know that I'm a long distance runner, and
Mhm.
have been all my life. And when as I've tweaked my nutrition, like over the years, like there was a time when I wasn't running, and I was just working a corporate job, and I ballooned up to what I say ballooned up to, like for me, 188 pounds. And so it was like, when I had to go to that next pant size is when I said, okay, I've got to start doing more exercise, really taking a look at what I'm doing, get back to my roots as an exercise physiologist, open my own deal. Like that's what I've got to do, is start telling people how to do it right. Because I could see I was doing it wrong, even though I knew everything.
Yeah.
And but for about 3 years, from like 2019 to 2022, I leveled off my weight, and I was like, okay, it's just not bad. This is like, it's a little bit heavier than my college running weight. Like I'm okay with that. Obviously I'm a lot older than that now. And then I started tweaking my nutrition a little bit more, and I lost 5 pounds. And I was like, we're like in fairly quickly, like within 2 months or so. And it wasn't because I did an extra number. I mean, and I could show people like my running has been like pretty much standard across. Like it's not like I just added 20% of effort or mileage or pace or any of that kind of stuff. And I was like, where did that come from? Like, what was that? And it was when I look back, I'm like, oh, I wasn't putting those things that I knew were damaging, but I was okay with it because I was running so much.
Yeah.
Right.
I always say you cannot out exercise a bad diet. And I think
Right.
we try to do that, or we maybe even unconsciously do that because we're not aware that the foods that we eat aren't bad for us, especially if you're listening to mainstream media or you
Yep.
look at marketing. Like I was looking this weekend at a health food store, cookies. It said keto cookies. I'm like, now, come on. What my dad would totally buy this.
Right. Right.
Because I told my dad, look, he was dealing with some cardiovascular issues and inflammation. I'm like, Dad, I really need you just to go on keto for a short time. I need you to eat proteins and lots of green vegetables. And he kept
Right.
saying green vegetables. So can I eat yellow squash? I'm like, is yellow squash green? No.
I love it.
Cauliflower. I'm like, is cauliflower green? I'm like, green vegetables for right now. This short
Yeah.
time, I just need your body burning fat and reducing inflammation,
Right.
um, and not sugar. And so then my sister calls, Heather, Dad just bought keto ice cream. I'm like, what? She's like, these weird like ice cream bars that said keto.
Right.
And I'm like, this is the craziest thing. I'm like, Dad, is it a protein or a green vegetable? So anyway, if you don't know,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm supposed to eat keto, right? Or paleo or whatever it is that you're eating.
Right.
And you go and you look at the boxes and the marketing in the store and you're
Hmm.
like, oh, this, I can eat this. And so then you start changing your diet for what you think is good. And then you
Yeah.
increase your exercise. But it's like when we eat foods that cause inflammation, no amount of exercise is going to be able to overcome that.
Right.
Now, you know, as the and I think in this age group, that is kind of the rule of thumb.
Right.
Even when we're looking at a younger audience, like I mentioned, my son, he's a college athlete. He's a baseball player. His body fat's 11% body fat. He's
Hmm.
210. So he's just like a large brick of muscle.
Right.
He can tolerate some extra sugar because his muscles utilize that energy better because he just has so much muscle.
Right.
But even for him over time, he's going to lose that ability. And I even put a continuous glucose monitor on him when he was here for Christmas. And he himself was like, well, when he got here, he was like 14% body fat.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, look, let's just play a game. Let's see in this month at your home if we can lower your body fat and maintain or even build muscle mass by changing up how you're carb loading, like what
Right.
kind of carbs you're eating, and let's stay away from sugar and all the processed stuff. And he's like,
Yeah.
okay, we'll do it. And then lo and behold, it became a game because he could
Hmm.
see what his blood sugar was doing. I had to continue, it gives us a score. So if
Right.
I was beating him, he didn't like that.
Yeah.
So he could see like when he would go get a milkshake, his blood sugar would spike to 170. He's like, can't believe that happened. So you can see it like
Yeah.
exactly, what it's doing to you. So by the time he left, he was like 11% body fat and he maintained all of his muscle.
Right.
And I was able to prove to him that your diet plays a huge role, even though
Mhm.
he had so much muscle and even though he has more tolerance. But for us ladies, especially, who have a thyroid issue, there's
Yeah.
like very little room for wiggle there.
Yeah.
Like our diets have to be really good just to maintain where we're at and to be able to utilize the energy and the nutrients that we're putting into the body.
Right. Well, and that's where one thing like from a college athlete standpoint, or for me who's a runner, like, yeah, I can have something that's, you know, considered damaging from a food standpoint. And like not see a weight issue, not see a, there may be an internal issue of some oxidative stress or something that goes up, but fairly quickly can be done with that if it's just one meal.
Yeah.
But for someone who's dealing with a thyroid issue or an autoimmune issue, especially, that one thing could be the trigger that sets off stuff for another 30 or 45 or 60 days, right?
Right. So, like, let's take gluten, for example. Gluten in the research has been shown. It's called molecular mimicry. So, if you have Hashimoto's, when you eat gluten, it causes the immune system to attack the thyroid. And it even can cause the immune system to attack the cerebellum in your brain. That's why we may get dizzy or feel unsteady, not, balanced on our feet. And those antibodies stay circulating for 90 days.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's like you think, well, it's not that big of a deal, or this gluten thing is kind of a fad, or maybe I'll just cheat once a week. Like those antibodies never go
Mhm.
away, right?
Yeah,
So there are certain things, especially dealing with autoimmune conditions, that when you eat them, it's a long road of recovery ahead.
yeah,
But see, you don't really even know because nobody told you that you
right,
shouldn't be gluten, right?
right.
So, and even like for my kids, I have Hashimoto's, so I know that autoimmune issues are genetic. And
Mhm.
so I likely passed that gene down to my kids, which is why I raised them gluten-free and dairy-free for our family, and mostly soy-free. And not that my 20-year-old follows it exactly.
Right, yeah,
He's like, "Hey, mom, Cane's makes unbreaded chicken." I'm like, oh, you're just figuring this
right.
out. So anyway, but you try to instill those values so that you prevent autoimmunity from turning on, but to understand that there are foods that directly impact your immune system the moment you put it in your mouth. It
Mhm.
has nothing to do with how many carbs, how many calories,
Right,
how much sugar it may have. It has to do with how it really impacts the immune system and what are the long-term effects of that.
right. And that's the piece, it's the long-term effects because your immune system gets so busy in dealing with these issues. And if you're genetically susceptible to autoimmune issues, then you continue it, then
Yeah,
you're fueling the fire. And like you said earlier, the longer you fuel the fire, the harder it is to continue to completely get
exactly.
rid of it.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so I feel like I could just keep asking you questions for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. So for that person that heard you and is like, okay, I think I need to talk to her and have her like give me some help or connect with you through Facebook and get a part of your group or however, like how can people follow you, learn more from you?
So the easiest way is to join me on Facebook.
Okay.
I have a group called Happy, Healthy, and Lean. I think the subtitle is Women Overcoming Low Thyroid, but
Mhm.
there's now over 23,000 ladies in that group, and it is
Wow.
such an amazing support system. And this year in 2024, I am doing a master class every month. So the
Oh,
topics do
nice.
change. We do a thyroid transformation masterclass. I just finished a losing weight with low thyroid masterclass. Coming up is going to be how hormones play into the thyroid issue. So I always am doing stuff to give loads and loads of content and information for ladies. And then my schedule is not usually open unless I'm doing a masterclass. And
Okay,
that's
cool.
how people can enter the
Yep.
practice. But I do want to make sure that, they have some information and some knowledge and they're like, okay, this is where I fit, or this is the information that I'm looking for. They can also find my book, The Thyroid Transformation Blueprint, on Amazon.
Cool. And I'll have those links for the Facebook group and for the book in the show notes so people can click on those and get straight to it. So before we end, is there anything else that like a nugget for somebody who's struggling and trying to figure out their way in that could be sitting there like you were in that doctor's office going, I don't think you're hearing me. I don't think you're telling me what's really going to get me where I want to be on a health standpoint. Like, what can help them stay motivated to pursue their solution?
I think that I just want to remind that person that you were born to heal. So not to give up hope, not to give up, but to keep searching for the solution, because the solution is out there. There's always a solution. And you just have to keep trying, and don't be scared to fire your doctor and find another one, right? You have to do something different if you want to get different results. And so I am certain that there is a solution for almost every problem that the body has, because it innately wants to move you into the direction of health. So keep searching, right? Come see my Facebook page. And if it's not the right fit, there'll be another one, right? There'll be somebody else out there. So just continue your search. Also, just put it out there, because I think when you're ready to change, or you're ready to find the solution will come into your universe, and you just have to take action. So don't just sit there and stay where you're at. You've got to take action and continue to try, because there is a solution. Yeah,
that's so true. And I fully agree with you. If you give your body the right tools, whether it's nutrition or medication in some instances, whatever it is, but you give it the right tools, it will heal itself. And take out the stuff that's in the way.
You have to remove the interference a lot of times.
Right. So thank you so much, Dr. Stone, for being a guest. It's been great.
Oh, you're welcome. I had a great time. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out the Confidence Through Health podcast. Please subscribe, post a review, share this episode with those you love who need a little extra help with their health journey. Visit allinhealthandwellness.com to learn more about the coaching programs that I provide. All episodes are produced by the Social Media Cowboys, your source for all online marketing needs. Go to socialmediacowboys.com for more information.